everybody! Today in the workshop we are painting a stand of the B1 Battle Droids for Star Wars Shatterpoint. So Roger, let's get to it. Alright, so my battle droids are primed, and I also gave them a little bit of a zenithal technique top coat. I'd actually originally experimented with 3 colors. I'd primed them all in black and then done another pass in gray and another pass in white. But I didn't like uh, the harshness of the black. So what I decided to do is just skip the black, and I did a full priming in Army Painter Uniform Gray, and then hit them from the top with Army Painter Matte White, and I'm really pleased with the results. It's a little bit more subtle, but I think it's going to look really nice. So our next step is to use, we're going to be using Citadel Skeleton Horde contrast paint, and we're going to give each of the droids an overall coating of the Skeleton Horde. This is a nice warm color, and I really think it's going to look really nice on these guys. So we're going to work kind of fast, because the other thing I want to do after all of these guys are covered, we're going to go back and make sure that there's no paint that's pooling. I really am enjoying using the contrast paints, but a lot of times what I want to go and check is that on flat areas, I don't want it pooling. I want it to get into the recesses, and I want to give a nice even coat on things, but I don't want it to pool on the large flat areas. So for instance, right here on the droids, on the side of the droid's face, there's a pool. So what I'm going to go back is just take that off and then wipe it off on my paper towel, and then come back and check for other pooled spots. Because what I want is a nice smooth coat, and I want it down in the recess areas and the lines and all that stuff. And I don't want it to show really dark patches on the raised areas. So here's another area right here on his leg. So we're going to just take that off and then make sure everything else looks good. I want to make sure that I've covered it. With the droids and all the tiny little parts and crevices and things, you want to be extra careful that you get paint on all of the surfaces. So this guy looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and do the other two, and we will be right back. So our droids are coming along very nicely. I have to, one little apology here. I videotaped the whole section where I painted the blasters, and then realized that I had not set up the video queue properly, and so it didn't record. Anyway, it's one of the problems with having multiple devices and doing things. But in any event, they're coming out great. And the next step I chose to do was the blasters. And for the blasters, I went ahead and used Citadel Black Templar contrast. And one of the reasons why I like that color for this application is it's thin enough that you still get some of the contrast paint effect with the highlighted areas, but it's also thick enough that if I had areas where I overpainted and some of the Skeleton Horde color was on the blaster, then it covers it up nicely. So it's a very good paint for that. So the next step in the process is going to be painting the red markings for the security droids. I have another stand that I did so you can kind of see what I'm talking about with these red areas. But that's going to be the next step. And for the red areas, I am using Citadel Khorne red. It's a nice deep red. It's not too fire engine red or anything. And I think that it will be a good color for that particular application. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of color on these guys so you can see what it looks like. I followed the illustrations pretty closely that I saw. There were some minor differentiations on the shoulder pads and stuff, but I just covered the areas that I thought would look really nice and give the droids a little splash of accent color because they are pretty much monotone. So anyway, I am going to finish up the rest of the droids and we'll be back to see how they look. Okay, so at this point, all of the base colors are on, and I could take this stand, finish painting the base, obviously, but I could take this stand and put it on the tabletop and play with it, and it would be just fine. But I want to add a little bit more detail to try to make these guys really pop. So one of the first things I'm going to do is, so for the skeleton horde, we've already got the nice effect of the recessed areas and the light areas. And I'm going to add a little bit more edge highlighting to that later. But the first thing I want to do is concentrate on these red areas. And I'm going to give them a wash of Citadel Carroburg Crimson to help bring out some of the dark recess lines and things. And then we'll go and do some edge work on those. So first thing we're going to do is just lay in a nice wash. And it really, on the other stand that I did, it really does a nice job. You can already see it. It really does a nice job of getting into the recesses and the lines and giving a little bit of contrast there. Right. So that's looking pretty good. I'm going to finish these guys up and then we'll get started on the highlighting. All right, we're ready to get started on the highlighting, and I'm going to be working on the red areas first. And for the red areas, I'm using Mephiston red. And all we're doing is just putting a little bit of highlighting detail and a little bit of edge work on these red areas that we just finished. Just to give them a little contrast. And make them a little bit more dynamic looking. And the Mephiston red really is a nice complement to the Khorne red and the wash. I think it works really well. All right, I'm going to go ahead and finish these guys up and we will be back. Okay, so now it's time to do the line work and the edge highlighting. We're going to start with the line work, and for that I'm using Basilicanum gray. This is a really nice paint for doing line work. I actually have some dedicated lining paint from Tamiya, but the Basilicanum gray is really nice because it's just kind of the right balance between absolute black and light gray. And because it's a contrast paint, it flows into the recesses and it's nice and thin. So we're going to take the Basilicanum gray and just pick out some of the lines, especially on the head. And like we're going to pick out the eyes just to make them a little bit more pronounced. And I'm also going to hit some areas on the arms and legs just to give some definition. And give a complement to the highlights that we're going to be doing as the next step. All right, so I finished up with the line work, and our next step is doing the edge highlighting. For the edge highlighting, I'm using Citadel Morghast bone. And as you may have noticed, I already did some of the edge highlighting on this front droid. One of the nice things about doing the highlighting after the line work is that you can clean up some of your messes. So you probably saw in the last segment, this line that I put in here was way too wide. So I used some of the highlighting to knock it down a little bit, and it looks much better. And you can see some of the highlighting here on the chest, on the arms, on the legs. It just gives the model a little bit more of a dynamic look, pulling out some of the higher areas and the contrast between the light and the dark. So I'm going to finish up the rest of these two guys. And then the last thing we're going to be doing to the actual models is the edge work and the highlighting on the blasters. So we'll be back to take care of that. All right, so our last bit of detailing on the models before we move on to the base is going to be the highlighting, the edge highlighting on the blasters. And for that, I am using Citadel Dawnstone. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but as a general rule for all of the edge highlighting and stuff I do, I always thin down the paint. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, it flows better and you get nicer, crisper lines out of it. And two, if it's a little thinner, it's not going to show up as saturated on the model. And so it'll blend a little bit nicer when you apply it to the actual model itself. So I'm just going to hit some of the highlights on these blasters and just to make the highlighted bits stand out a bit. You may have also noticed that I've been using multiple different stands. I'm trying to find one that holds the model but doesn't get in the way of the camera and my ability to get in there and paint. And these work well, I think. So anyway, we're just highlighting, just bringing out a few of the highlights on the blaster, and then we will move on to finishing the base. So we'll be right back. All right, the base is the last thing that we're going to do, and I've already laid down a base coat. I did the base coat in Dawnstone, and I did the line work in Basilicanum gray, and I touched up the lines a little bit. So the next thing we're going to do is lay in some dry brush highlighting. I'm going to start with Administratum gray because it's a little bit lighter. We're going to clean off our brush with most of the paint. And then we're just going to do some circular dry brushing just to introduce a little bit of texture and not have it be just a flat panel of gray. So now this could be done either with a chisel, a flat dry brush, or the circular dry brush. I like the circular dry brushes, especially for big areas like this, when I'm doing large flat areas, because it makes I think it makes the effect a little bit more subtle. And you don't see a lot of the actual line work, you just see the effect. So I think that's enough of that color. So we're going to switch over to a little bit lighter. I'm going to use Deepkin Flesh. This has a little bit of green, just a teeny little bit of green. It's like a creamy green color. And so I'm going to use that sparingly, just as a finish to kind of give a little bit of a different effect in spots. I'm not going to do the entire thing. I'm just going to add some unevenness to the pavement here. Yeah, that's looking much better. I like that. There we go. So the last thing we're going to do on the base, I'm going to take a lighter gray and actually do some line work just to make those lines pop a little, and then we're going to paint the rim. And then at that point, I think we are ready for the top coat, and we'll be all done. So we'll be back. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start doing the lighting edge work, the lighter edge work, I should say. I'm using the Administratum gray again. It's just a little bit lighter than the dry brushed area. I've already done some test spots over here. So I'm going to assume, based on how I did the droids, the light source is coming this way. So I'm going to be hitting all of the edges where the light is actually going to strike them. So we're just going to come in here and lay in a little bit of line work. And it's not anything super complicated. We just want to put a little bit of line right along those edges where the sun is going to strike it. And again, that's just to make the base look a little bit more dynamic and a little cooler. So there's one here. And I have watered down the Administratum gray just a little bit, just so that it flows nicer. When you're doing line work like this, it's really important for the paint to be thinner and be consistent, because you don't want blobs along the lines. That kind of makes them look funny. I'm also going to do a little bit of an effect around one side of these holes and these little chips. just also to kind of help them stand out a little bit. All right, this is coming along nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up, and then we'll be back to paint the rim. All right, and our last step is painting the rim of the base. I've already started it. We're using um, the Black Templar contrast, and we're just laying in a nice coat. I'm not sure if I'm going to do 2 coats on this or not. I kind of like the way it's looking with having a little bit of the um, gray showing through, so it's not like absolutely perfect pitch black. But I'm going to let it dry, and we'll see. In any event, after the rim is done, I'm going to give this a matte clear coat, and then this stand will be ready to get on the table. So we're going to let that dry, and I will come back with the finished model. And this group of droids is done. These guys were fun to paint. I really enjoyed doing these guys. They're simple, pretty quick to paint, but they look really nice on the stand. So looking forward to getting them on the tabletop and playing with them. Once again, thanks for joining me in this video. And if you go to the description, there is a link where you can download a PDF version of the list of paints that I used and the steps that I took to create these or to paint these guys. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.